Everyone believes I'm loyal, but I've been secretly planning to leave my husband for my ex, and hearing that sentence come out of my own mouth makes me feel like I'm stepping barefoot onto a cold kitchen tile at 3 a.m. Shocking, bracing, honest in a way I've avoided for months. I'm Lila, I'm 31, and I'm a speech therapist at a public hospital, which means I teach people how to swallow safely and find words again after strokes while my own mouth has been busy rehearsing a story that doesn't line up with the life I keep set out on the dining table like matching cutlery. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too the first time my chest whispered something I wouldn't dare say out loud. You're not the kind of person who does that. I'm the one who carries emergency tissues in my bag and marks my food containers with dates like a librarian of leftovers. I remember colleagues' kids' names. I still send my grandmother postcards. The idea that I could be the one drafting an exit, me with my neat handwriting and my sincere love of lists, felt like a badly cast play. And yet here we are, and here I am, and my lists now have a second column I pretend is for work research, which would be funnier if it weren't true. My husband is called Noah, which feels like some cosmic in-joke when you consider how much of our marriage has been about building something sturdy enough to float. He's a civil engineer, patient, slightly sunburnt despite SPF 50, unreasonably excited by drainage. He likes maps and will watch videos of bridges being built to relax. The first time he stayed over, he folded my dishcloth without being asked, and I nearly cried because I'd never seen domestic kindness performed without commentary. Loving him felt like putting your hand on a warm stitch of sun on the floorboards. We got married under a jacaranda, and for 3 weeks after, purple petals kept turning up inside our shoes like confetti that couldn't read a calendar. The quiet we made together felt like a room with good windows. It still does. That's what makes this harder to explain and harder to bear. And then there's Theo. I say his name carefully now, like holding a glass you know has a hairline crack. He was the boy I learned adulthood with, 22, share houses with couches nobody could vouch for, a haircut he pretended was deliberate, and a laugh that kicked in late like it forgot the line. He studied architecture and drew buildings with bodies in them, alleys where street musicians would sound good, windows placed like eyelids. He made breakfast in an old frying pan and called it pan toast, which is just toast but somehow better when you name it. We got good at sleeping badly together and at believing in each other when neither of us deserved the confidence. We were also excellent at arguing. He hates being told what to do. I believe all things are solvable with a plan and a 3-step laminated checklist. We broke up the kind way, or so we told ourselves, not in a dramatic fireball but like a lamp burning out, the light softening, flickering, then not being there when you reach for the switch. He moved interstate for a job that promised him a skyline. I stayed and took a position at the hospital, where I fell in love with the small heroics of a person's first clear sip of water after weeks of thickened fluids. Heartbreak and purpose can overlap. I learned that young. For years, my memory of him sat somewhere between nostalgia and a lesson. I married Noah and became the kind of woman who can remember the exact rotation schedule for ward speeches and the best bar that stays quiet enough to actually talk. I got really good at co-authoring a grocery list. Different happinesses exist, and mine was tidy, warm, tender. If you had asked me, I would have said confidently, I'm not haunted. I know what ghosts are, and I don't have any. Then a patient brought one back. She was 59 and stubborn, a left hemisphere stroke that took whole swathes of language with it and left her fury intact. That's normal. Fury can be the most intact thing in the room. We were working on naming everyday items, watch, spoon, cup, when she misfired and called a door Theo. She laughed, then cried, furious with herself for making a mistake her brain had made for her. I reached for a tissue and said lightly, I used to know a Theo, and she looked at me with a sparrow's pinned attention and repeated very clear, I still do. It was nothing and everything. I went home and opened an old folder in my email called Receipts, which is where I put anything I don't want to look at but can't bring myself to delete. Warranties, sad songs, phone plans, and yes, the last thing he ever wrote me, if I stay, I'll drown. If I go, I'll dry out. I don't know which is worse. I stood in the kitchen with the fridge door open, letting everything warm up while I let myself remember. This is how it starts, not with a kiss in a badly lit bar, but with a sentence you pick up like a shell and can't help pressing to your ear. When he messaged, it was both random and inevitable. Hey, speech wizard. Saw your paper. You're fancy now. My friend Priya had posted about our small research project, swallowing rehab protocols, nothing viral to anyone but my corner of the world, and apparently one algorithm had bumped into another and there he was at the top of my screen. A reasonable person acknowledges, replies, and moves on. I said as much out loud to my kettle, which likes to think it is a friend. I typed thanks. How's the skyline, and put the phone face down because it makes me feel like I've put the problem in timeout. His reply was pure Theo in that particular register that feels like walking barefoot somewhere you used to know every nail, funny and slightly earnest and threaded with an old secret we both pretended not to notice. He was back in Sydney for a project. He was staying in an apartment in a suburb we once walked through saying, one day, like children pointing at the biggest present under the tree. He wrote, no pressure but coffee. I showed Priya, who scrunched her mouth like a parent hearing a toddler ask for a blowtorch. You don't owe nostalgia your time, she said. It's a bad debtor. I nodded. I also put a clean t-shirt in my work bag, which is how you know where this is going. We met at a cafe that had the nerve to call its croissants crescent pastries. He was the same indifferent, the way cities renovate old buildings. The same laugh, the same eyebrows, the same fierce pleasure in making me look at something, see the way the brick is clipped. And different in the quiet around his jaw, the less boy at the corners of his eyes. He bought my coffee without asking and then apologized for choosing because he remembered how I am. I remembered too. The mercy of grown-ups is that we can say, let's not do that part like last time. It was easy and then dangerous, and it got dangerous because it was easy. Not kissing easy. Conversation easy. I told myself that was safer, words as fencing, not as fuse. He asked about my patience and listened like he wasn't just waiting to tell me something about a stairwell. I asked about his buildings and tried to keep from making jokes about men and towers, but he did it for me and we both laughed, a rhythm we used to slip into without tripping. I got up to leave and he said, "Can I walk you to your bus?" like a generous stranger on a night street. The bus came. I didn't get on. There are 1,000 versions of me that still make the other choice. But there is also this one. I did not go home to confess. I went home and made chicken with lemon because it's Noah's favorite and because my body reaches for tenderness when my mind is cheating. He kissed my shoulder while I chopped and asked if my day had any success worth boasting about. I told him about a man who swallowed thin water for the first time in 8 weeks and didn't cough, and we both did that quiet cheer that belongs to wins nobody outside our world understands. Then I kissed him back like a person who deserved her life. That's the cruelty of double living. It doesn't always come with villains. It sometimes comes with good men washing pans. The planning crept in like mold under paint. I didn't write plan to leave husband in my notes app because I'm not a cartoon, but I started making lists that wore disguises. Professional development goals contained among the reasonable items like present at dysphagia conference, a bullet that read discuss moving to part-time. Who was I discussing it with? The version of me who would need Tuesday afternoons to look at rentals without anyone clucking. A list called ward supplies ended with 2 towels for new place? I lied to myself about it being for the staff shower, then underlined the question mark so hard the pen almost split the page. I opened a new bank account at a credit union with an earnest logo because married women with control issues do that, yes, but also women building lifeboats. I labeled it tax. I told myself that wasn't a lie, all escapes have an audit trail. I started saying our lease in sentences more often, as if rehearsing the word would make it easier to break. It wasn't just logistics. It was a motive thought I kept widening so no one could walk to me without a drawbridge I controlled. I imagined splitting the books, the kettle, even the sourdough starter we never managed to keep alive. I inventoried music like a war. I took longer routes home and made them look like I was in love with jacarandas. I used guilt like a sleep mask. It didn't work. Sleep came anyway because my body is pragmatic even when I'm not. Dreams got bright. They smelled like petrol and rain, like the first summer the city turns on the fans and everyone forgives each other for being too hot to be sensible. If you need the admissions index, yes, there were meetings you would call dates if you weren't trying to be careful with words. Lunches that turned into late afternoons walking the long way around the park. A Saturday we spent in an art supply store touching brushes like they were sacred because we both knew they were about to become props. He reached for my wrist to see how the paint stained it. I reached for his throat to adjust his collar. Small touches piled up like receipts. I didn't cheat with sex. I cheated with intention, which, you can argue, is where everything important happens anyway. The day I told Priya I was planning to leave, she asked one question I will be grateful for until my bones forget me. "Are you planning to leave him?" she said, "or planning not to be the person who would do this?" It took me a week to answer, and the answer kept changing. Some days I thought the plan was a way to step from a life I had outgrown. Other days I knew it was a performance to make me feel active while I crouched at the door of an impulse I wasn't brave enough to act on. I bought 3 cardboard boxes and put them under the bed. I put a list called to pack in my phone. Then I didn't put anything in any box. Some nights the restraint felt like a muscle, other nights it felt like a lack. Noah began to notice in the way kind men do, not with dramatics but with quiet recalibrations. He asked if I wanted to take a weekend by myself to read and reset, which is the sort of suggestion a certain kind of husband makes when he senses his wife is turning into a tuning fork. I said yes because I wanted the optics to remain favorable even to myself. I booked a place that looked like a brochure for Alone. Theo drove me there because I am a fool who thinks ghosts should be introduced to the living rooms they'll haunt. We sat on the porch with our knees touching like teenagers on a settee. We talked timelines like lawyers. He said, "I'm not asking you to blow up your life." I said, "Yes you are, you're just using polite words." He looked out at the gum trees and said nothing for a while. Then, "I'm asking you to tell the truth." "Which one?" I said, and we both hated me for how easy the line sounded. I tried to tell Noah the truth in installments like a payment plan. "I'm restless," I said. He nodded. "Work is heavy lately. I need more time alone. We've become roommates." He rejected none of these and fixed each with some act of gentle engineering, a dinner reservation, a holiday, a shelving unit I didn't need. I realized with something like grief that he would always build whatever road I pointed to, even if it led me away from him. That is a love so decent it can drown you. It drowned me a little. It also made me mean because it is fashionable to be cruel to what you can't hate. I was in a session when the shatter came. Mr. V, patient, witty, a retired bus driver who flirted with every nurse with a sparkle only someone who's outlived embarrassment can deploy, was practicing naming pictures on cards. "House," I said, showing him a line drawing. "Car, apple, dog." He got stuck on home. He looked at it a long time and then said my name very clear. "Lila," he said, and tapped the card. "This one is tricky." "It is," I said. He looked at me as if I were his granddaughter and said, "Don't be dumb." I laughed, then cried, then lied, "Allergies." He nodded like a man who has seen enough to let people have their scripts. After the session, I sat in the stairwell and texted Theo, "I can't do the half-life anymore." He wrote back, "Okay." Just that. Then, "I'll meet you wherever you land." I stared at the words and thought absurdly about plane fares and luggage weights and how you can check a violin but not a dog. That night, I told Noah I was planning to leave. I gave him the clean version first. Unhappy, confused, need to find myself separate from a plural. Then the degraded one, there's someone else. He went very still, not like a man preparing to strike, but like a person listening for a faint sound in another room. "Is it him?" he asked, which made me understand there are names we never say but always store ready. "It's not about him," I said, which was true in a way that didn't absolve me. He nodded once like a jury foreperson, then set a glass of water in front of me, then sat down across the table like we were about to divide a country. He asked reasonable questions, time frame, logistics, whether I'd told my family. I answered like a practiced liar with a degree in manners. Then he surprised me. "Do you know," he said, "what kind of alone you want?" I didn't. I thought I wanted the kind of alone that comes with new sheets and an ugly lamp. I thought I wanted the kind of alone that doesn't feel like absence but appetite. I said, I'll find out. He nodded because he's not the kind of man who argues with sentences that are both foolish and necessary. He slept in the spare room that night. I packed a box, then unpacked it because I didn't want to leave with my things smelling like decision. Theo sent a practical message the next day, a list of rentals near a park because he knows I breathe better when there are trees. He wrote, no pressure, and I believed him in the way you believe a weather forecast when you already have your umbrella out. I toured 3 flats. In one, the light fell like blessing. In another, the neighbor's television was broken to exactly 2 channels, sport and crime. In the third, there was a window above the sink, and I almost signed on the spot because that has always been my ridiculous criterion for happiness. I called Priya from the alley behind the building and said, if I pick this, I will have to be the person who pays for this. She said, that's always how it works. Her voice has a way of bringing the air back. Lila, she added, don't outsource your nerve. What do you want me to say? That I left him that week and it was clean? That I stayed out of guilt and that was noble? I did neither. I became a woman in a holding pattern, the kind who could narrate both futures and commit to neither. It was awful in the exact bureaucratic way awfulness can be. Forms. Deposits. The humiliating math of pretending you can afford 2 lives while living none. I ate toast a lot. I cried in the shower because water disguises cowardice. I put the boxes back under the bed. I kissed my husband goodnight and not goodbye. I met Theo at a park and laid out the map of what I wanted like a person trying to justify an hours-long hike to someone who has already done it. What changed? Honestly, my mother. Not because she scolded me into virtue, but because she shocked me into specificity. She has rheumatoid arthritis that flares like a bad joke whenever the weather changes, and on a Sunday when I'd planned to compare leases and think deeply about towel colors, she called and said, I can't open the jam. I went over and opened the jam and made tea and we sat in that mother-daughter silence that lives between 2 good chairs. How's work? She asked. Heavy, I said. How's Noah? Kind. And your heart? She asked, eyes on the biscuits, as if by not looking at me she could make it easier for me to look at myself. I said, Mum, I am planning to leave, and she nodded like she'd been waiting for me to do my homework. She didn't say, finally. She didn't say, don't you dare. She said, do you have a plan for when you cry and a plan for when you don't? I laughed so hard I hurt my throat. Both, I said, because I had towels and soup and Priya and enough money for 3 months and a therapist who kept asking me where in my body the truth buzzed. Okay, Mum said, then you will be all right and then tell Noah properly. He has always treated you like a person. You should return the favor. I told him properly. He cried. I cried. We did that adult thing where you put clothes into bags while touching each other's shoulders because your hands need to know the person you loved is still warm. We gave the house a list of instructions as if it were a pet with separation anxiety. He put the blender in my boot because he never uses it. I left him the citrus squeezer because he does. He said, I hope he deserves what you're breaking, and I said, I'm not doing it for him, and we both liked and hated that answer. Then I went and signed for the place with the window above the sink. This is not the part where I say I moved in with Theo. I didn't. We tried to. We lasted 4 nights before I realized that if I went from one set of plates to another without a pause, I'd turn into a person who confuses momentum with integrity. He took it like a person who has learned something the hard way. He stood in my terrible little kitchen with its excellent window and said, Call me when you're alone is generous, not punitive. I said, will you wait? He said, I'll live, which is not a promise and probably the only right answer. So this is where you find me, in a rented place that has no curtains yet and therefore teaches me about mourning whether I want it to or not. I'm buying spoons one at a time because it slows me down. I eat standing up some evenings because chairs feel like a commitment. I see Noah once a week to hand off the plant we accidentally co-parent. How do you do custody for a pot of basil and we are not unkind? Sometimes we laugh and then we both look at our shoes to be polite. I text Theo. He texts me. We have coffee in public places and don't say the future tense. I sleep alone on sheets I bought because they were on sale and because they felt like an announcement only I needed to hear. Planning to leave and leaving are different verbs. I am in the overlap, the vesica Pisces of choice and consequence. Everyone believes I'm loyal. They believed it because I performed loyalty like a skill. Maybe I still am loyal, just to something no one else can see, the version of me that doesn't tell Patience to try again while building her own life out of almosts. I am not romanticizing this. It hurts in the boring ways, forms, bills, the way your hand reaches left to touch someone who isn't there, the way you discover you always made too much pasta because you were calibrating for two. It also hurts in the sharp ways. I broke a good man's heart. I may break another if what I want turns out to be air. I speak in present tense about a plan that is already a past in the making. In clinic this morning, a woman named June said home perfectly for the first time since her stroke. She closed her eyes after and whispered, yes, like she had threaded a needle in the dark. I wanted to kiss her hand. Instead, I wrote home 10/10 on my worksheet and circled it twice like a child. On the train home, I stared at stranger windows and counted people who were probably carrying secret nouns, heavy and necessary. I came back to my good window and boiled the kettle and texted my mother a photo of the first meal I cooked here that wasn't toast. She sent back, "Is that pan toast?" with 3 heart emojis because she's funnier than she knows. I laughed. I thought of Theo's bad frying pan and Noah's careful dishcloth and my own foolish belief that a new kitchen will make me a different kind of hungry. Then I ate and I washed the pan and I let it dry without commentary and I stood at the window over the sink because this is exactly why I wanted it, and I told the exact truth to the empty room. I am not the kind of person who does this. I am the kind of person who did. And tomorrow, I will be the kind of person who keeps telling the truth out loud until my hands catch up with whatever my mouth has finally learned to say.